The United Nations Secretary-General is calling on the world's biggest polluting countries to fast forward net zero targets a decade to 2040. Emphasis is on China, after it last year approved the largest expansion of coal-fired power stations since 2015. Antonio Guterres warns the climate time bomb is ticking as a new report on the state of climate change is released.
From devastation in flooded Pakistan to wildfires in Europe and melting ice at the poles and beyond, climate change is getting worse and the window to act is closing. That's the message from United Nations scientists releasing a landmark report summarising their work over the last decade.
The climate time bomb is ticking. This report is a clarion call to massively fast-track climate efforts by every country and every sector and on every time frame. In short, our world needs climate action on all fronts, everything, everywhere, all at once.
The nod to Hollywood accompanies a major shift. Developed nations, says the UN Secretary-General, must now try to get to net zero carbon emissions, not by 2050, but by 2040.
We have seen rich countries going backwards on their climate policy. And these countries who are historically responsible also have the resources and capability to reduce their emissions, but also meet their obligation of supporting developing countries who still have a large development deficit.
The synthesis report highlights why so much more action is needed. Global warming has already reached 1.1 degrees above pre-industrial levels, and at least 3.3 billion people are now highly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, including increasing food and water insecurity and forced migration. And we are experiencing increasingly severe weather events, as well as damage to nature, economies and human health. But the report is clear. Hope for limiting warming to 1.5 degrees remains.
Every government of this world, every national and subnational, every CEO of this world, we know what to do, we have the knowledge and technology, but we need to implement them to get to net zero quickly.
At its core, that means rapidly ditching fossil fuels. But this is proving difficult. The UK just one of many countries still approving new oil and gas projects. An example of the challenge of tackling climate change and why, without better efforts, globally agreed targets may be slipping out of reach. Hannah Thomas-Peter, Sky News.